Michael Bailey got his start in biopharma sales and marketing a few moons ago, kicking off his career at GSK before making a move to Genentech, where he was group manager of cardiovascular programs, and then ImClone, now Eli Lilly, where he was senior VP of commercial operations. Collectively, those three stints comprised the first 16 years of his career, and during that climb, he worked with and led teams that notched up a lot of antibody wins. Erbitux, Cyramza, Androderm, and Necitumumab among them. He joined Synta Pharmaceuticals, which since merged with Madrigal, before he became Chief Commercial Officer at AVEO Oncology in 2010, Chief Business Officer there in 2013, and now CEO since 2015. That tenure brought another win in Fotivda and the advance of multiple more late-phase antibodies that are in the commercial preparation queue today. While Michael has many winning credits to his name, he's also faced and overcome a lot of adversity along the way. I'm Matt Pillar. This is The Business of Biotech, and on today's show, we're digging into some of the stories of commercial perseverance with AVEO Oncology CEO Michael Bailey. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm glad you made the time for us. And you know, I want to get into some biographical info on you. We're gonna kind of shelve that for a minute and get right into the quick of the discussion here, if that's cool. You know, looking over your CV and your wins column, so to speak, it's impressive. I mean, a biotech builder can go a long time, a lot of years, an entire career maybe, still making fantastic contributions to the space, to the science, but go winless. You've played a hand in what, from my perspective, looks like an above average number of commercial successes during your career. And the first thing I wonder is, like, as you traverse, you know, kind of navigate your career, are you keeping like a wins loss column somewhere? Are you keeping like some hash marks somewhere along the way?
First of all, Matt, again, thank you for inviting me to appear on your show. And you know, like everybody, I've got memories of my successes and failures. I think I'm probably better known for my failures, although I have logged up quite a few successes. But the reason I'm better known probably for my failures is that it's what you learn from those challenging experiences, and I think that's what people are looking for. Is in this business, you're going to run into those kind of challenges. And, you know, one of the things I think my experience provides is just, you know, how to work your way through that. With that, I was extremely privileged, as you mentioned, on a lot of wins, to work on some amazing products. And I know all of these serve to improve the lives of patients. As you mentioned, at SmithKline Beecham, I led the launch of Androderm, which is our first testosterone product. I was on the Augmentin commercial team, and if you have kids, everybody knows Augmentin for otitis media, sinusitis. We did a major repositioning initiative on that. In addition, I had an opportunity there to do a rotation in the field where I got to launch Relafin, which was for arthritis. So got to see kind of a lot of different perspectives, stages in product life cycles. As you mentioned, I went to Genentech. There I worked really in new products where I think it was really important to bring the customer to the development process. And I worked on a next generation thrombolytic called TNKs that was ultimately launched. Then, as mentioned, worked at ImClone for their first launch, which is always an exciting event at a company, Erbitux, and then their follow-on, Necitumumab. Erbitux went on to be a blockbuster. So, you know, that was a pretty exciting event. But as far as my most recent success with it is with AVEO, but it was preceded by a significant setback. And again, those are the things you really remember. But, you know, overcoming that setback and kind of charting a path forward, which included not only securing funding for additional pivotal studies, but ultimately getting the first product approval for the company and a subsequent launch in 2021. And just not to make it even more complicated, we launched in the middle of COVID. And, you know, very proud to say that despite launching in the middle of COVID, and despite the setbacks earlier, I believe we executed on a flawless launch, and were ultimately recognized by ZS as one of the best launches of the year. Follow that on with this success caught the eye of LG Chem, who ultimately became our parent company, and they were looking for a proven oncology commercial organization to acquire. And I feel like that this is one of my biggest and most proud accomplishments, if you will, which is the resulting deal, which I've defined as a kind of win-win-win.
Mm.
So, if you can get a win-win, that's great. If you can get a win-win-win, that's amazing. And let me describe what I mean by a win-win-win. We wanted to develop our pipeline. We didn't have the funding or the investor advocacy, if you will.
Yeah.
So LG was willing to provide that. So we really won for the patients because we're moving our important portfolio forward. My team, my employees who got us to where we are, were all retained. So it was a win for the employees, and was one of the fastest growing stocks in the year that the acquisition occurred. So our shareholders won. So a really nice win-win-win for everybody.
Yeah, that's outstanding. I'm curious, and I've asked this question of biotech builders before, who have been in similar positions, having come from big bio and been on big teams that having played a hand in the launch, the commercial success of therapeutics in big bio, and then moving to biotech and taking a small company, a small team that perhaps had those investor challenges and more. And winning there too. Contrast those for me, like personally for you and for your team, the feeling, the sense of accomplishment. Contrast that between big bio and biotech.
Well, I would say that the biggest contrast is in biotech. It's survival.
Mm.
Where in big pharma, maybe it's growth and share price and some of those other things. So, when we set out as kind of the turnaround of AVEO, we had a small team we called the Go Forward team, and there's 20 people, down from a company that was roughly 260 people. And our strategy, top line was to survive. And
Yeah.
that, obviously part of that is survive while we're progressing our agent through the clinic and then ultimately to the patients. But I would say that's the biggest thing. There's an incredible amount of stability that, I think big pharma affords because they've got a huge portfolio of products, where most of the small biotechs are going to be one product, and it's a do or die. You've got to make the right decisions. You've got to be fiscally responsible to maintain that kind of lifeline, or that runway, to be able to achieve the clinical results from your study. And like I said, I think big pharma has a little more of a luxury there. As I think about the LG collaboration, we have the best of both worlds now, because we operate as a biotech. So there's a lot of kind of innovation, excitement, a lot of nimbleness, risk taking, ability to do all those things. And now we have this parent company, LG, who's got incredible financial security, and that works as a safety net. So I feel like we've gotten to the best of both worlds, the biotech spirit with the stability of a big pharma. And I would say, I've been in this situation before when I was at Genentech, when Roche came in and had acquired them, but they let them live that spirit of biotech that really, I think, creates innovation and advances science.
Particularly when you're, with Genentech pre-Roche, when you're at ImClone, now AVEO pre-LG acquisition. What is it that, I mean, to your point, when you're working in big bio, failure is the norm across the board, whether you're in big bio, biotech. In this business, the losses almost always outnumber the wins. But when you're in small bio and you don't win, when you encounter a setback, when you kill a program, when you need to pivot, it can be deflating. I mean, just human to human, it can be deflating, right?
Yeah.
What keeps you as the leader in those organizations, motivated to keep moving forward when things don't end well. And when they don't end well in small bio, they can end well, in a pretty dramatic, or they can end unwell in a pretty dramatic fashion.
Yeah. So first, I would 100% agree. This is tough business, a high rate of failures. Your losses are going to outnumber your wins. Hopefully, they won't outweigh your wins. And I think it's kind of ties to how you deal with your losses. But one of the things we have to keep in mind, and I always remind my employees, and they remind me, is that it's a privilege to work in this industry. We're doing something incredible that's going to touch countless lives, change families' lives, extend life. And that's a really important thing. And I don't think there could be a better job in the world. And that's my personal opinion. And I believe that I share that with most of the people who dedicate their careers to this type of patient focused mission. And that concept of mission, I think, is really important, because I want to get back to your specific question. What do you do when you have a setback? And I think the simple answer is you focus back on why we're doing what we're doing.
Mm.
So, as I thought about taking the CEO job after a major setback in the company, I asked myself kind of what are the reasons I'm doing this? And the first thing is always got to be patience. We're doing this because we think that what we're developing is going to improve the lives of patients. Then on top of that, there was a career aspect of it. First time CEO, that's a wonderful thing. And then, if you're really successful in biotech, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to generate wealth. Well, if I think about all those three things through my career, through this journey of being a CEO, there's been days I woke up and said, my career is over. I have just made the worst mistake of my life. And
No,
there's no way.
that's the personal insight I was looking for, Michael.
Yeah, and there's no way I'm going to make any money here, and my shareholders are going to hate me and all that. But the thing that got you out of bed was saying, I believe in the product, I know the data. We just have to get through this and make it happen. And that's the kind of thing that really gets a team that's mission focused moving forward. I kind of think about it as the heart and the head. The heart is that mission focus, and we really want to make sure we're doing it. But the head part of this is really important. We have to make prudent decisions, and we have to make thoughtful decisions. We can talk more about kind of philosophies about making decisions, but one of my philosophies is all about know the data, do the homework, listen to your advisors, listen to your employees. The whole concept of diversity that we hear a lot about, to me, is diversity in thought. And that diversity in thought comes from diversity in race, gender, experiences, religion, all those kind of things. But it's the idea of getting that full kind of 360 perspective on the important challenges that you're facing and listening to those. And I think too often people listen to themselves and not to others. And that can create kind of, if you will, limited thought process.
Yeah. Just for context and clarity, you've referenced a couple of times now a setback at AVEO. Can you share a little bit about that? What that setback was?
And I'll start with setting it up with I had two kind of major setbacks, and the similarities were actually uncanny. And I think getting through the second one was a result of having gone through the first one. So when I was at ImClone, we got an RTF for the first drug, Erbitux, when it was first filed. And that was largely because I think there was a lack of active listening. The FDA was saying, hey, I got concerns, da, 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 da. But I think, the team at the time was listening and saying, I want to hear what I want to hear, which is this is, green light, full speed ahead. They filed, and then they got an RTF. Ultimately, that was a very important period of time in my life, because a lot of people left the company, as you might imagine. The company had gone down. There was a lot of bad press that went along with that. But, if you looked at this honestly, it was clearly a drug that worked that had a bad study designer. It was, in this case, it was just not adequate study designer and not adequate data to be able to get the FDA approval. long story short, persevering through, we ended up launching the product and ultimately sold the company, as you mentioned, to Eli Lilly for $7 billion. So that kind of failure turned into a success. Now, fast forward to May of 2013, I've just recently joined AVEO as a chief commercial officer. The data reads out. It met its primary endpoint, but there was a study design, one-way crossover, not to get into too much detail, but that confounded one of the secondary endpoints that the FDA was very keen on, which was overall survival. So we didn't show what we hoped to show on the overall survival. Long story short, we ended up getting what's called a complete response letter, as many of your biotech listeners would understand what that is. And what a major setback. So at that point, our global partner exited, just literally dropped, the contract on the door and said, we're done. And then the management at the time decided to shelve the product. And I really did not necessarily agree with that. I actually moved to a chief business officer, tried to spin the oncology products, including tivozanib, which was the one that got the complete response, spin it out. But long story short, in about 2020, 2014, I had really thought about all that had happened, acknowledged the mistakes that were made, and try to look beyond this failure to identify a clear path forward for this really important drug that provides efficacy combined with tolerability. So again, square in our mission of improving the lives of patients with cancer. And that's really what really motivated me, was this was something that was aligned with our mission. And we owed it to the patients to bring this therapy to them. And provide a product option that does provide both efficacy and safety. So in 2014, after being chief business officer for about a year, I shared my proposed strategy with the board. And ultimately in 2015, I was appointed CEO of AVEO. So kind of instead of folding up on Bativda, we decided to focus on the mission, set out on what we knew was going to be an arduous path to raising capital, executing on another phase 3 study, which was the TiVo-3, and then ultimately launching. And God knows we could never have anticipated that we'd be launching in the midst of a global pandemic where you can't actually see your customers. So
Yeah.
Obviously in the end, grateful we didn't fold it. But I'll be the first to say it wasn't an easy journey, but I will say it was worth it. And, and another important thing, one can say, gosh, you got lucky, and we did. I'm not going to deny that. But at the same time, I firmly believe luck favors the prepared mind. And our little go forward team of 20 people were prepared to take on all the challenges we had to take on, and we got to where we needed to go.
Yeah. I mean, in that anecdote alone, those two anecdotes, those two stories collectively shed a little bit of light on any number of challenges, some preventable, some completely unforeseen. I mean, you talk about COVID, like, well, there's a challenge that nobody saw coming. And, at the end of 2020 and all of a sudden in 21, everything goes to hell in a handbasket. Looking back on that, looking back on the things that can influence success or failure, the things that, more pointedly can indicate imminent failure, human biology, funding, competition, the regulatory environment, as I said, unforeseen things like global pandemics. Looking back, can you, like, if you were going to advise our audience on some of the things that maybe are foreseeable, that are the most formidable challenges a biotech leader might face? I mean, is it even possible to say, well, there's a handful of things that are.
Well, it's funny when you start thinking about, what are the things that a biotech executive is challenged with. Well, there's all the know that you better know your market, you better know the data, you better know the science. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to people, and having the right people around you, keeping them motivated, especially as, I mean, look, this is a slow moving business. I mean, you do a phase three study, it can be 3 years where you're sitting there waiting for the card to turn over, and you've got to, really be driven during that period of time while you're waiting the uncertainty. And then you get, market dynamics that come in, financial concerns, you've got competitive news that comes out. So again, I don't mean to be too simplistic, but it comes back to really refocusing people on the mission. Someone very wise once told me, as you're in your CEO role, every opportunity you get to state the mission, which is to improve the lives of patients with cancer. I think I've probably said it a half dozen times
Mm-hmm.
already, and I apologize for that, but it
No,
rolls off the tongue.
something you should never apologize for, right?
It rolls off the tongue, and it is truly, um, the thing that keeps people focused. Because when you start getting distracted about a variety of things, then it's easy to lose perspective. And when you keep that simple perspective in place, you're going to be in a much better position. The other thing, look, as a CEO, you kind of feel every bump in the road. So it's important that you keep what I refer to, and it's actually one of our core cultures, is realistic optimism. Nobody wants to hear you say, "Oh, everything's going to be all right. Don't worry," as you're going over the edge of a waterfall.
Mhm.
But keeping that realistic optimism, transparency, being able to share with your employees the risks, the challenges that we have, and understand what we need to overcome them, I think is really important. The other thing, again, and I'll kind of put the CEO hat in, is just, gosh, there's so many stresses in what we do. And one of the things that I do, kind of two things to try to manage stress. One is I try to keep a good work-life balance. Part of that is trying to be healthy, at least get some exercise, do something other than just working 14, 20 hours a day, which you absolutely could do as a CEO. And
Mhm.
the other thing is have fun. I learned that at Genentech, the work hard, play hard mentality, but a good laugh, a couple of beers with your colleagues, those are the kind of things that just make it say, yeah, this is okay. I feel good about what I'm doing. I enjoy the people I'm with. So it's important, as a CEO, to set that tone. I wear shorts. I just put my jacket on for this, but I wear shorts to work, and Hawaiian shirts, just to kind of make sure everybody knows, hey, what's really important is the work we're doing. Enjoy yourself on the journey.
Yeah. Well, you didn't have to put a jacket on for us, Michael. I appreciate that you did though. You look great. Um, I don't want to belabor the failure questions, um, but and we'll we'll turn it towards winning here shortly. But a couple more on this, like at AVEO. I mean, you could have folded. You could have folded. You could have even gone down with that ship and then jumped on another. Plenty of biotech CEOs do it. A company goes down, they see it to the end, and then they pop up on another one. You didn't in this case. You fought for what you thought you should fight for. Ended up winning that battle. But when it is time to fold, how do you know? You got to know when to hold them. You got to know when to fold them.
Yeah.
What goes into your calculus when it's time to fold?
Yeah, I don't think that's a simple answer,
I know I have a tendency to
as
ask
I'm sure you
these.
know. But
Yeah.
it's funny because I'm actually exploring this in a book I'm reading. I don't know if you've come across "Quit: The Power of Knowing When to Walk Away" by Annie Dukes.
No, I
Uh,
haven't.
it's an interesting exploration of how we decide to persevere or when to quit. Or Annie Dukes actually was a professional poker player,
Hmm.
so she uses the term "when to know when to fold them," as you've referred to.
The Kenny Rogers analogy applies.
Exactly, exactly. And here's the other thing she explores, and I think it's really interesting. I would encourage anybody to read it. And it made my executive assistant really nervous when I ordered the book, because she's like, "Are you quitting?" I said, "No." I'm just trying to understand when it's the right time to quit. And I'm not talking about your job, but you can give up on a project or move on to the next thing. And I think that's the genesis of your question.
Hmm.
But one of the challenges just in society, quitting is looked down on. How many times your coach, whatever, your father, your mother, in growing up, say, "Don't be a quitter. Get back in there. Just keep going." And she takes an interesting exploration into, in life and in business, quitting can often be the right decision, the best decision. And I'll just make it concrete for you. A couple examples that stuck with me from her book was Muhammad Ali decided to continue to keep fighting and trying to regain the title.
Hmm.
Another is the folks who have uh, summited or quested to summit Everest and decided not to turn around and just to keep going, even though maybe the bad weather is coming in, and ultimately it costs them their lives. So there's a good time to quit and a bad time to quit. In my personal experiences, I've been incredibly fortunate that in taking a step back, reflecting on the situation, being very candid and objective. And part of that is, as I think I mentioned earlier, it's acknowledging your mistakes.
Yeah.
What's one of the hardest things I think people have is that I made a mistake and that's why we're in this situation. But we can fix that mistake. We can take another course to overcome it versus just saying, I'm going to shove this aside and hide it in the closet because I don't want to acknowledge a failure. So I think the key thing is really being objective. I think it's understanding the complete situation. You got to do your homework. I mean, I spend a tremendous amount of time reading clinical studies. I'm not a scientist, but there's a tremendous amount of value. I take a lot of time reading books about kind of competition and how to ultimately be successful in variety of arenas. And then probably most importantly is I talk to a lot of smart people.
Hmm.
And I listen to those smart people and get their perspectives. And it's not just the winners. You go out and say, "Yeah, I'm going to go find that winner, the guy who, has never missed on a swing." But those are not necessarily the people that you're going to learn from that are going to benefit you when you're faced with the challenges. It's, look the failures in the face and learn from them.
Yeah. When we talk about failure in biotech and biopharma in general, I think there's I guess the general, I guess, proclivity is to talk about clinical failure. But in recent years, we've seen some multi-billion-dollar post-commercial failures, right? Like multi-billions of dollars in sales projections, and the product just fizzles after it's been approved, after that, you know, that quote unquote finish line has been realized. You've had experience with multiple commercial successes. Um, so I guess the question I want to get at there is like post-commercial failure. And there are case studies upon case studies written about what went wrong. When everything was going right, what went wrong once the commercial finish line was achieved. Um, in your experience, what are some of the factors that go into the post-commercial win or loss, conquering a market versus falling apart after billions of dollars were invested and billions of dollars in sales were projected? And how do you obviate for a post-commercial, uh, a post-approval meltdown?
Yeah, well, let me just start by saying commercial launches are incredibly complex. And
Mm.
I think you have to have an appreciation for the challenges and the complexity of that. I'll go back to my Imclone days. I remember first presenting my strategic plan to, basically the board, which is largely scientific folks. And, I think the feeling was, oh, this is a great drug. It's going to sell itself. And we talk about issues and reimbursement, awareness, education, just to name a few kind of common
Hmm.
issues that you have to overcome. And I remember having to change the way I presented the issues. And I started everything. The drug will sell itself if the physicians and patients get reimbursed. The drug will sell itself if the physicians are fully aware of the data. The drug will sell itself if we are positioned distinctly from our competition.
Yeah.
And it was just that nuance. And it's true. I mean, if you've got a good drug, people are aware of it, they can get access to it. It's, people, and it's providing an advantage. I think there's a certain momentum that goes along with that. But all those other things you can't take for granted. And one of the things, again, it goes back to, know the data, know the risks, know the science. And it's, as a commercial person, one of the things we pride our group on is that we know the data cold. And, not just our data, but we know the competition's data. And that's critical to be able to find those little opportunities to distinguish yourself, and then ultimately match that up with a patient population that can benefit the most from it. And, that to me is how you sell. It's utilizing evidence-based medicine, utilizing the data, utilizing the science. But the other important thing that I think people don't consider enough is just the changing clinical scientific landscape. You need to be looking 10 years down the road, because if you need to take a turn or make a shift or an adjustment in your development program, it's going to take you 3 to 5 years to be able to do that. It's like turning a battleship. You can't just, tomorrow say, okay, now this is our new positioning. It just doesn't work. You have to, I firmly believe you have to support that with the evidence-based medicine. So, again, being a student of the markets, being a student of the science, again, goes back to talk to, people who are creating the future and understand where it's going to go and anticipate. So many of the failures that you see in the marketplace are just some, are situations in many cases that they just didn't anticipate that the world was going to change.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to the Xerox kind of story. Not to, but just to make it concrete that, they didn't anticipate the change in the world. And, that applies for pharmaceutical biotech marketing too.